Hi, my name is Stephanie Sebing from Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and I'm going to teach you how to make a t-shirt quilt. In this first step, we're going to be cutting the designs out for our t-shirt quilt. So to do that, you need a pair of scissors, a rotary cutter, a 12.5-inch quilting ruler, and optional is a 6.5-inch ruler, and that's if you have smaller motifs that are sort of on a pocket. And you also need a cutting mat and a stack of t-shirts. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to be making t-shirts, or a t-shirt quilt out of my t-shirts from high school. So if you have just a shirt that only has a design on one side, then you can just lay that flat on the table. And you want to smooth it out so that you don't have any wrinkles in the t-shirt. It doesn't need to be like iron flat, but just smooth enough to where you're not going to get a little bump and have an uneven edge when you quilt it, or when you sew it together. So what I'm doing now is I'm centering my 12.5-inch ruler over the design. And sometimes you're not going to be able to get it exactly center because sometimes the distance between the top of the design and the collar is not that great, but that's okay. So now I'm taking my rotary cutter and I'm slicing along two sides of the t-shirt. And the easier thing to do rather than move the t-shirt is to just move the entire cutting mat, because that way the fabrics won't shift on you and you'll be sure to have a perfect 12.5-inch square for piecing later. So once you've cut it all out, you can just lift it out. And sometimes those corners will get stuck, and that's okay. Just use your scissors to snip those. And then we'll put this in our pile with the other t-shirts. When you're done with that, just toss it to the side. Now, if you have a t-shirt that has designs on both sides that you want to use, then the first thing you want to do is cut the sides so that you can cut that separately, because the design isn't going to be in the same place on the front and the back. So just use your scissors to cut close to the seam line along both sides of the t-shirt. And again, you can just toss the extra to the side when you're done. These t-shirts quilts are great, because I'm never going to wear these t-shirts from high school again, but I've got a sentimental attachment to them, so I don't want to throw them away. And now I'm cutting these shoulders here. But, you know, with a little bit of fabric and a little bit of DIY, you can have them to use and keep warmer. So now I've got this cut apart, so I'm going to lift the top part off and then put the back right sides up. And again, I'm going to smooth this out, which is a little bit more difficult with this one because there's so much ink on that screen printing. It's kind of making it stick up on me. But just make sure you can get it as smooth as you can. Go ahead and center your ruler. And it doesn't have to be exact. Just kind of whatever looks good to your eye. Because it's going to be your quilt, so whatever you think looks good, does. And then again, turn that around. Cut the other two sides. Oh, there's a little corner that's left, so we just take our scissors, just give a little snip, and add it to our growing pile of t-shirts that will be the blocks of our quilt. Our quilt blocks are going to be 12.5 inches. It's a real good size for a quilt block. So if you have smaller pieces that aren't quite 12.5 inches, you can always put them together to form a 12.5-inch block. And that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so this is a perfect example. Obviously I have a whole lot more space here than I do up here, but that's okay. When you get it all together in the quilt, that extra white or space where there isn't any design, it's going to look just fine. It's more about preserving your memories than having ink fill every single part of your quilt block. Okay. Okay. Clip that corner, don't drop your scissors. And now we've got both sides cut out of that shirt. Now one last thing you can do, which I mentioned a little earlier, is if you have a t-shirt that just has a little pocket design, and you don't want to have a ton of space left over like we did on the last quilt, because this one will look a little funny if you just do the pocket design, is you can just make 4 6.5-inch squares, and when you cut those out and put them together, or sew them together, it will form a 12.5-inch block. So I've got this pretty much centered. Scoot it over a little bit there. And when you're cutting with a rotary cutter, I find it helps to keep your pinky on the side of the ruler, and that kind of helps the ruler stay in place so that it doesn't shift on you. And also, if you've never used a rotary cutter before, make sure you keep your fingers far away from the blade, because this will cut through the finger and it will not be pretty. And you don't want blood on your quilt, so it's not fun. So now we've got a cute little mini square, and it'll fit in real nicely with the others that I cut out previously. And when that gets sewed together, it will be the same size as these blocks right next to it. And you can also do the same thing if you have writing on sleeves. I've cut these out of a sleeve, and it's a 6.5 by 12.5 inch piece. Sorry, we have dogs, and they love to bark. And another 6.5 by 12.5 inch piece. And when we sew these together down the seam line, that'll make a regular 12.5 inch block. So thank you for joining me, and next time we'll show you how to attach interfacing to the back of these blocks, so that way the t-shirt material won't stretch out on you when you're sewing it together. So come back to QuiltAddictsAnonymous.com, and I'm Stephanie Stepping. Goodbye.